You have probably heard of the Everglades and its many legends. It's that swampy part of Florida between Miami and Fort Myers. The place is known for the skunk ape lore and all the rumors of escaped animals breeding there and becoming extremely aggressive. Many of these legends are indeed true, and if you live in South Florida, you may have heard of the so-called Squallies. Sometimes they're referred to as pig people. East of Naples, Florida, on the edge of the Everglades, is a large, partially developed residential area called Golden Gate Estates. Originally a Florida land scheme run by the Rosen family in the 1960s, some of the area has been developed while the rest consists of miles and miles of streets with few or no houses. The portion south of Alligator Alley was declared undevelopable and is a large, muddy swamp. The few who reside in this swamp are frequented by bears, pythons, anacondas, gators, crocodiles, chimpanzees, bobcats, deer, hogs, and even panthers. According to local legend, somewhere in this vast area lives a group of people called the Squallies. They are said to be short humanoids with a pig-like snout, also called Squally kids due to their short stature. According to most accounts, there are 30 to 50 Squallies in the area. There are several stories as to their origin. Some claim that they were produced from a government genetics experiment gone wrong. There are stories about an abandoned laboratory somewhere near DeSoto Boulevard and Stewart Boulevard where they were created. The most popular theory, though, is that they were simply the result of inbreeding amongst those who resided in the area. Something about backwoods guys sleeping with their sisters or something like that. According to some of the legends, they live in a place called the Nathlorendum Sanctuary. Allegedly, this sanctuary is guarded by a crazed squally man who will shoot trespassers on sight. It's unclear just what he is. All agree that the Squallies will try to hunt any humans who enter their sanctuary and eat them alive. Is this just an urban legend? Quite possibly. I was able to find one documented report of questionable veracity. It was in the Naples Daily News. The report reads, Golden Gate Estates, Florida, June 14, 2021. Police in Florida said a man accused of crashing his motorcycle told officers that the incident was the result of a boogeyman. The crash occurred on Stewart Boulevard just east of DeSoto Boulevard and was regarded as a minor accident. The Florida Highway Patrol said James Scarborough, 49, of Golden Gate Estates, was taken to Physicians Regional Hospital with minor injuries Sunday after he apparently crashed his motorcycle into some trees and became pinned under the vehicle, the Naples Daily News reported Tuesday. Police said Scarborough was shouting profanities and attempting to leave his hospital bed when they arrived to interview him. They said he denied crashing his motorcycle and told them he had become pinned under the bike due to the actions of the boogeyman. What is a squally? Hard to say. Officers said they smelled a strong odor of whiskey. This is not the only account I had found of the Squallies. I later received an account from a resident in Naples, Florida. A few months ago, my friend told me about this thing called, a squally that supposedly lived down the road from me. I didn't believe her until I asked some kids at the local school, and they said they heard about it too. But this is what I was told by one of the kids who said his father had seen one. He said it was a short, human-like creature with a flattened, pig-like snout. The Squallies live in a highly protected community in the wooded outskirts of Golden Gate, Florida, in miniature houses. It seems like many locals are convinced that they've actually seen the Squallies. The theory is that they are a government-protected conspiracy where people were genetically mutated and sent to live at a place called Nathlorendum Sanctuary off DeSoto Boulevard, and that planes and helicopters land on the long roads in the middle of nowhere. Others say that the Squallies wait for people to break in so they can capture and eat them alive. There's some old guy who lives on the property who will shoot you if you trespass. My friend's cousin went to that place late at night and saw the old Squally guy walking around with a rifle. Some woman near me believes that it's a base for alien beings. Not so sure about that. Haha. Recently, I decided to go out and explore myself. I met two young people on a trail at Picayune Swamp, in their 20s, obviously locals who'd asked me if I had seen any squallies. They explained the legend to me as I had just recently heard about it, and they said that the center of the Squally Legend was located only a few miles away along DeSoto Boulevard. I'm an explorer and a nature photographer who searches for the skunk ape and other cryptids. After photographing several footprints in the Everglades, and so I was very interested. After a lot of research on the subject and exploring the entire length of DeSoto Boulevard, I found the Nathlorendum Sanctuary was a private property once owned by a man named Bob Sykes, who was a philanthropist and loved nature and was an avid humanitarian, and after his death, not so long ago, he left the property to be made into a preserve, now part of the Picayune Strand State Forest. The new preserve is supposed to open on September 1st, and I plan to be there. Check out the video on the State Forest Service website. It will show you that Bob Sykes loved nature so much. I continued searching deeper into the glades and finally noticed the gate to the Nathlorendum Sanctuary. It was located near the corner of DeSoto Boulevard and 108th Avenue Southeast. It was a huge wooden gate attached to a concrete archway, not unlike the gates of Jurassic Park. Above the gate, it said in red letters, Nathlorendum Sanctuary. I had happened upon it, an old, honest-to-goodness, abandoned mental institution. I noticed that the whole place looked absolutely deserted. I assumed that this must be the home of the alleged Squallies. Within the sanctuary were all sorts of rusted-out Airstream trailers and what once looked like a campground. Everything in the area seemed burnt and charred like some kind of tragic fire had occurred. I kept exploring, hoping to take a few photos of the Squallies, as I have a strong interest in cryptozoological oddities. After passing by the abandoned camp and the burned trailers and cabins, I came to the asylum gates. The gates said, Sunshine Mental Institution for the Developmentally Challenged. If there ever was a Squally lab, it must have been in here. The inner grounds of the place were just as overgrown as the entryway. Palm trees stood untended and ragged amongst piles of their own coconuts. Banana plants similarly stood in their own stinking, bug-riddled refuge. There was this sort of clash between order and chaos, as carefully planted rows of perennial flowers mixed with the obnoxious tall weeds and stinking, blackened mushrooms. All that remained of any outdoor structures were broken, rotting wood and various charred bits of unidentifiable material. I approached the main building, the institution, only to find the outside of the building covered in graffiti where the original paint hadn't peeled and chipped away. The front doors weren't just open, they had actually been taken off their hinges and were stolen. I wish I could tell you about the awesome stuff I saw inside the main institution, though. Forgotten statues, abandoned labs, and a full-fledged secret society of homeless bums. But no, it's much worse. The inside of the building was so stark, so bare, that I actually think people had stolen the molding off the walls. Anything that wasn't too big to steal or nailed down, counters, desks, giant fake trees, they were all resting amongst this empty echo chamber that amplified every step, like the slow rat-a-tat of a machine gun. The kitchen was as you'd imagine, an industrial food prep area with appliances and space. Every glass surface was broken, every door knocked off its hinges, every metal surface kicked and dented. The whole place smelled like very old piss. The huge freezer, not even remotely cool now, had row upon row of empty shelf space. Hooks hung from the ceiling, possibly for hanging cuts of meat, and as I stood inside for a moment, I noticed they were swinging. Each hook swung in a random direction, but their movements were so slow and so small that it was almost impossible to see. I figured it had been caused by my footsteps, so I stopped one from swinging and letting it go. But within seconds, it started to swing once more. The bathrooms were in much of the same state as the rest of the place. Someone had methodically smashed each porcelain commode with coconuts and other implements. There was about half an inch of rancid, stinking, stagnant water on the floor, so I didn't stay very long. What's odd is that the toilets and sinks and the bidets in the ladies' room, yes, I went in there, all dripped, leaked, or just ran freely. It seems to me that they should have shut the water off long ago. There were plenty of rooms in the institution, but naturally I didn't have time to look through them all, and I didn't expect to find anything there. I thought there was actually a television or radio on in one room, and I really think I heard some squealing and a conversation coming from there. Though it was like a whisper, it might have been my own breathing echoing in the silence, or just another case of the sound of water playing tricks on my mind. This is what it sounded like. I didn't believe that. I didn't know about that. I didn't know about that. Your father told you. I know that sounds ridiculous. I know that sounds ridiculous. I'm just telling you what I experienced and why I thought there might have been something running in that room. Or worse, some vagrants who had holed up in there and probably would have knifed me. At the front doors of the institution, again, I figured I hadn't found anything of note and had wasted the trip out. As I looked out the door, I noticed something interesting in the courtyard that I had apparently missed. Something like that would give me at least one thing to show for all my trouble, even if it was just a photograph. There was a lifelike statue of a python, maybe 80 feet long, coiled up and sunning itself on a pedestal right in the center of the area. I approached the python and snapped a photo. I then stood on my toes and snapped another. I moved closer again to get the detail of its face. Slowly and casually, the python lifted its head, looked directly into my eyes, turned and slithered off the pedestal, across the grass and into the trees. All 80 feet of it, its head disappeared into the woods long before its tail even left the sunning spot. People had released their exotic pets out here once they had gotten too big. I was dumbfounded, utterly stupefied. I blinked a few times and backed away from where the snake had been, back toward the entrance. Even though it was totally gone, I wasn't taking my chances and backed my way into the building. It took a few deep breaths and slaps to my own face to get myself right in the head again after this. I looked for a place to sit down, as my legs were feeling a bit jelly at this point. Of course there was no place to sit down unless I wanted to recline in the broken glass and dead leaf carpet, or haul myself up onto a desk of questionable stability. I had seen some stairs near the institution lobby and decided to go there and have a seat until I felt better. The staircase was far enough away from the front of the building as to be relatively clean, save for a startling accumulation of dust. I pulled a wedge of metal off the wall, once again painted with the same "keep out" model that I had been accustomed to. I placed the wedge on the stairs and sat on it at least to keep somewhat clean. The stairway led downward, below ground level. Using my camera flash as a sort of improvised flashlight, I could see that the staircase ended at a metal gate with a padlock. A sign on the door, a real sign, read, "Science Lab, Technicians Only." This perked up my spirits a bit, for two reasons. One, a science lab area would have definitely had some interesting stuff back in the day. Two, the padlock was still in place. Apparently nobody had been down there. Not the vandals, not the looters, nobody. This was one place I could actually explore, and perhaps find something interesting to photograph. It actually didn't take much to bust the lock. Well, actually that's wrong. It didn't take much to bust the metal plate on the wall where the padlock was hooked to. I was able to bend the metal plate enough to pull the screws out of the wall, something nobody else had apparently thought of, or hadn't been able to do at the time. The lab area was a startling and very welcome change from the rest of the building. For one, every second or third fluorescent light overhead was still illuminated, even though they flickered and faded then. Also, nothing had been stolen or broken, even if age and exposure was definitely taking its toll. Tables had notepads and pens, there were clocks, even a punching clock on the wall complete with filled out time cards. Chairs were scattered around, and there was even a small break room with an old static-filled television and long rotted out food and drink on the counters. As I walked through the maze-like sub-basement hallways of the lab area, the sights just became more and more interesting. Everything was just sort of squishy. Anything wood had disintegrated into mush when I applied even the slightest amount of force. One of the things that annoyed me was that the light was becoming more sparse and further into the dark, suffocating depths of the labs. I eventually reached a door marked DNA Lab. The door had the biohazard symbol on it and was slightly ajar. I opened the door, and within the room were all sorts of beakers, many of them broken and splattered all over the floor. The room was totally destroyed, like most of the place. I thought everything was quiet, and I noticed weird snorting sounds, almost like the sound of a pig. I had heard lots of pig noises, but it seemed like a whole bunch of pigs were down there, but I didn't know where they were. Suddenly there was a growling sound, and then a short little squally came out of a small hole and made a loud roaring sound. He was about 4 feet tall and had a pig face. I was able to get a few pictures of him. I even was brave enough to get in and take a close-up. Then he said in an oinking voice, "I can squeal like a pig." Suddenly, about 10 or so squallies came out into the lab. I ran like heck to get out of there. Slamming the lab door behind me and wedging a chair to keep it closed, I ran like heck and hightailed it back to my car. I sped down DeSoto Boulevard so scared I was driving like 100 miles an hour to get out of there. I then hit a pothole and my car spun out of control. I recently awoke at Physicians Regional Hospital and have been writing this from my hospital room. People should know about this place and not to ever try to find the Squallies. I do not condone visiting this place at all. As I write, I am in extreme pain and think I have been exposed to some sort of chemicals in that lab. I just noticed some pink fur on my belly, and my nose has begun to grow. I think I am transforming into a squally, and whatever is in that lab was locked away and covered up for a reason. After I finish writing this, I am going to return to the old Sunshine Mental Institution, where I will join the Squallies in defending that place and keeping others away from what mess is down there. The doctors think I'm crazy, and I feel the Sunshine Mental Institution is where I belong. For now, farewell.